here we go. Deck 78.
Hey, welcome to an all-new episode of Deck 78. Let's take our chairs. I'm here with DAREN DOCHTERMAN, Ashley Miller, STEVEN Melching, and it's me, Mark A. Altman, and we're all grabbing a seat here on Deck 78, and we got a exciting new episode. We are going to talk about the greatest gift anyone ever received, and I am not talking about love. I'm talking about the Mogwai, the Gremlins. Remember the Gremlins?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Remember Hoyt Axton went into that store?
I do.
And he kind of absconded with a little Mowgli, gave it to his son.
No, that's
that would be the Jungle Book, my man.
That's the Jungle Book. Oh, he got it all the way home. I got the wrong box.
Like his kid jumps out. Hi.
Yeah, he's doing a convention. He's at a inventors convention, and Robbie the robot is behind him.
That's right. Because
trying to sell the bathroom buddy.
Yeah,
it's not a Joe Dante movie
behind him. That seems to work. Did you notice that?
Which one?
The time machine.
Yeah, there's like this thing, and it's like, and I think the sign says like time machine, or is it a teleportation device? But if you look, there's the he's on the phone, like what's his name, Hoyt Atkins or whatever, and
Hoyt Axton.
Thank you. And he's on the phone, and behind him, there's like this machine, and these people looking at it. I think it's like time machine, and it cuts away, and when it comes back to him, there's just smoke, and the machine is gone.
And all these people are running over like, what happened?
Oh, that's hilarious.
Pretty brilliant.
That's great. Joe Dante, there's so much love he has for the genre. And, it's in all his movies, there's so many great little throwaway gags, and they're more so than in Gremlins 2, with Christopher Lee and Robert Picardo and, everybody. It's just, that movie doesn't get enough love. How do you guys feel about Gremlins versus Gremlins 2, Steve?
I think it's better, honestly. I like Gremlins 2 is more fun, I think.
What about you, DAREN?
I think I rate them both equally. I'm not a huge fan of those movies, but they're fun.
Okay. What about you, Ashley?
I really appreciate Gremlins 2, but I really loved Gremlins because of the
fact
I'm
the tiebreaker.
Yeah, you're the tiebreaker.
DAREN's like they're equal. They're equally mediocre. Steve's like, I like Gremlins 2 better than Gremlins. Ashley's like, I like Gremlins better than Gremlins 2.
Up to you, Mark.
Although I should say, seeing Gremlins in the theater was one of my favorite movie-going experiences. It was a really fun night at the movies.
I saw it twice in the theater.
Going.
The votes must be unanimous, Mark Altman.
Uh-oh. I got to go with Gremlins 2, the new batch. I just think it's more fun and more inventive. But the Gremlins is great. And I hadn't watched Gremlins
bigger
for
fan of Robert Prosky.
Yeah, exactly. I hadn't watched Gremlins in a long time. I rewatched it recently, and I really enjoyed it. Well, we know ZACH GALLIGAN's a fan of one of them and not really a fan of the others. So you want to stay tuned to listen to this interview with ZACH GALLIGAN. Also, you can learn about his unrequited love for Phoebe Cates, which is something I think we probably all have.
Unrequited love for Phoebe Cates.
We all have in common with Mr. ZACH GALLIGAN. So stay tuned after these brief commercial messages as Ashley Miller and I sit down with ZACH GALLIGAN to talk about Gremlins.
And I'm there too.
Are you?
You are?
Yeah.
I'm with you
ZACH
too.
GALLIGAN? Absolutely.
Okay. And DAREN was there too.
Anyway, yeah, right after this message.
When Sweet Tarts dared to combine sweet and tart, they thought, why stop there? Why not create other exciting and unexpected combinations, like rainbows and ropes, or fruity and gummy, or chewy and more chewy? That's why they created fun treats like Sweet Tarts Twisted Rainbow Ropes, Gummies Fruity Splits, and Chewy Fusions. When you dare to combine, it's sure to blow your mind. Sweet Tarts, dare to combine. Visit sweettartscandy.com to shop now.
Don't you love it when things are both easier and more affordable? Like when the rain washes your car for you. Or like when you save up to 10% by bundling your renters and auto insurance with USAA. Bundle with USAA and start saving. Get a quote today.
To realize the future America needs, we understand what's needed from us. To face each threat head on. We've earned our place in the fight for our nation's future. We are Marines. We were made for this.
And we're so delighted because, of course, we are paying tribute today to the second greatest Christmas movie of all time. Next to Die Hard, it's Gremlins. And to celebrate this August anniversary, I'm delighted for the first time we're sitting down to talk about the Gremlins duopoly. Right? 2 movies would be a duopoly, right?
I think you're right.
I think I'm right, too. Okay, let's just go with it. And so we want to welcome ZACH GALLIGAN.
Behold, Columbus. I bring forth gizmos for your Christmas enjoyment.
Okay, so everybody make sure you keep your water bottles closed. Well, 40th anniversary is crazy. You know, I mentioned at the beginning that obviously Gremlins, at least in my mind, is a Christmas movie. Is it a Christmas movie to you, Zach?
Well, you know, it doesn't really matter anymore because the public decides what's a Christmas movie or not. It was funny because you mentioned Die Hard, and I remember back in the day when Bruce Willis got up and said, by the way, Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. And I kind of wanted to go, excuse me, sir, you're just an actor in the movie. You don't get to decide the Die Hard Christmas position. You're just one simple person in the equation. A significant one, I will grant him that. But the public decides whether or not Die Hard is a Christmas movie, not you, good sir. So basically, Gremlins has become a Christmas movie, and I'm thrilled about that. I mean, part of me is partially convinced, you know, not fully convinced, but partially convinced that if it wasn't for the sort of seasonal theme in the movie, Gremlins may not have survived, you know, for all 40 years. I think, you know, one of the things that's nice about it is we force you to watch it every December, whether you want to or not. So you just, whether you want to forget it or not, you can't. It's just kind of shoved in your face. And so it's like, it's Christmas. It's Gremlins time. You're like, oh, yeah. So thank God for the seasonality because it just is the gift that keeps on giving.
Gremlins time is here.
Correct. It's beautiful. I like that.
Bonnie Bedelia does think Die Hard is a Christmas movie, so she disagrees with Bruce.
There you go.
Okay.
So they cancel each other out. So there you go.
Well, and speaking of Gremlins, a Christmas-tude, how can a movie in which Phoebe Cates gives that remarkable monologue about Santa not be a Christmas movie? And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about it because, of course, you met Phoebe before getting this film and had the chance to audition for, what was it, Shakespeare in the Park? I'm trying to remember, but...
No, it was, you're close. It had a Shakespearean aspect to it. It was the 1982 Paul Mazursky movie Tempest, based on Shakespeare's Tempest, with John Cassavetes, Jenna Rollins, and the lovely and fetching Susan Sarandon, who was the first person I ever auditioned with. I walked in the door and there was Paul Mazursky and he's like, oh, by the way, Susan's going to read with you too, if that's okay. I was like, boing.
Okay.
Because she was just, I was like, okay. And she was like in her early to mid 30s. And I could still remember I just did a convention with her in August and I wanted to talk to her and tell her. And then I was like, she's not going to care. Why would she care? I auditioned with you 41 years ago. She's like, that's nice. But, you know, like I was like, kind of did the switch and I was like, but if it was the other way around, would I care? But anyway, I can still remember what she was wearing. She looked like she came from maybe a dance class or was going to go to a dance class. She had on, you know, sort of like, she had basically a leotard top, jeans, remember early 80s leg warmers and boots. And so she looked like she was on her way. You know, she had a dance skin top and everything like that. Perfectly coiffed hair in gorgeous ringlets and two of the largest, brightest, bluest eyes I'd ever seen. And I was just like, I was 17. I'd just never seen a woman like that. And I was just like, what? I am in the right profession now.
Time to enroll for jazzercise.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was amazing. So that's how I met Phoebe. She and I, that we were in what's called a mix and match session, which in casting is like, let's put some people together and see whether or not, we believe they have chemistry. Let's throw them together and see if they do. Have whether it's physical chemistry, emotional chemistry, they look good together or whatever. So the first girl that I read with was a girl from one of my favorite all-time movies, All That Jazz. It's who played Roy Scheider's daughter. Her name is Erzsébet Foldy, Liz Foldy. So I read with her, and then I read with Phoebe. And I mean, it was just like I was in heaven, and I couldn't believe that there were these people. They looked like mutants. They were so physically attractive. I'm like, where what factory are these people coming from? And because I certainly wasn't that cute, and so I met her then, and then we got paired together again for the same thing, mix and match for Gremlins. And I think that the fact that we had already worked together, and we'd been paired together for a couple of other things, which is kind of unusual. So you usually don't pair two dark-haired people together because there's a feeling that you look like possibly brother and sister. You know, a lot of times you'll see a dark and a light pairing so that they look distinct and different. But not always. And so we had a lot of familiarity with each other, and I think that was a key factor.
Yeah, and you paved the way for Kevin Kline.
Actually, because I kind of know Phoebe and Kevin reasonably well from doing the movies, Phoebe met Kevin on auditions for The Big Chill. She was going out for the Meg Tilly part. I know I'm going back 4 decades, but you guys are all film fanatics, I would imagine. And even if you're not, you can go back and watch The Big Chill. It's an amazing movie. So there is a young actress, Jennifer Tilly, who's in Chucky. Her sister, sure. Meg Tilly, is in The Big Chill. And so Phoebe went in and read for that part. Clearly didn't get it. Meg Tilly did. But she met Kevin at the time. And both of them were like, okay. How are you? I'm doing great. I'll see you in 3 years and we'll get married. Yeah. So that's where they first met. And they've been together now since 1986, which in Hollywood is pretty remarkable.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear you talk about The Big Chill because, of course, Big Chill was 83, I think.
Correct.
And it's such a great movie.
Yes.
And it's one of those films that people don't talk about as much. But at the time,
yes.
It was such a seminal film.
And
it captured this, for that generation, just this whole idea of, especially the quote-unquote for yuppies in the 80s. And it's so great. And Meg Tilly's great in it, much better than she is in Psycho 2.
She's very good in that. I think that movie hasn't stuck around because it is kind of dated. And I think when movies get dated, that's the beginning of the end for them. And one of the reasons people always say, how come you think Gremlins has stuck around for so long? And that is that if you look at Gremlins, it really doesn't date itself very much. It's in a kind of nondescript town. It could be anywhere you want it to be. It could be almost any time. Technology doesn't play much of a part in it. I mean, I'm on a rotary phone maybe once. You barely notice it. So there's not a lot in comparison to other movies where it gets dated, like where you see something like Enemy of the State now. It's still a good movie, but a lot of the computer stuff looks very 20th century, So Gremlins has a kind of a deliberately timeless quality. They left a lot of stuff vague. Kingston Falls, we don't really know where it is. I always thought it was either, quite honestly, Ohio or Indiana. It clearly looks Midwestern to me. It seems Midwestern. I tried to give Billy kind of a Midwestern flair, even though I had never been to either Indiana or Ohio. It was my approximation of you guys. And because I was a Manhattanite. I didn't know. I hadn't been west of the Mississippi before I did Gremlins, till I flew to Los Angeles. And I was like, what's this West Coast thing about?
Well,
that was some culture shock.
Joe Dante definitely has that sort of style. I mean, he shoots as if it was a 50s movie, masquerading as an 80s movie.
Yeah, except it's in color, weird color, with John Hora doing the DP, right? He always does weird color schemes and filters and stuff like that. But Joe is till this day very influenced by a lot of 50s pictures, like especially, he even throws it in Gremlins, original Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Absolutely.
Robbie
Don
the Robot.
Siegel, Robbie the Robot's in there from Forbidden Planet. And, you know, I mean, I think those were the 50s movies, were movies of his childhood, so they were very impactful.
Yeah, I want to ask you, I mean, obviously one of the axioms is never work with kids and animals. So you're working with kids, you're working with animals, and all due respect to Gizmo here, you're working with Chris Wallace and the animatronic Gremlins. So what was that, you know, challenge? You have to, you know, act and give a performance, but you have that great performance by the dog. You know, you have a, you know, you're dealing with Corey Feldman, who's a kid at the time. I mean, and then you have to deal with this mayhem and all this stuff that's going on with the Gremlins and, of course, Gizmo. So what were the challenges for you as an actor doing all that?
Well, you kind of enumerated them pretty well. But, you know, what you have to throw in there, too, is that this was my second movie. It was the lead role. I was working something like 68 out of 75 days. I'd never been to Los Angeles. I was a Manhattanite, so I didn't drive. If you've been to Los Angeles, you know how challenging it is not to be able to have a car. So luckily, they stuck me in Westwood, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, where UCLA is located. So you can kind of, it was a lot of walking that you could do in stores and shops close to each other. So as long as you walk down there. But it was, you know, it was an emotional challenge for me too. And those of you who are interested in reading more about that, I have just completed my first book called Being Billy, The Making of Gremlins, which covers March 1983 to July 1984, from the beginning to the very end, the emotional roller coaster, the ups and downs. I mean, I suffered from a lot of what I would call not necessarily imposter syndrome, but not sure I belong here syndrome. Kind of like someone who skipped high school and went to college. I just felt like I'd skipped a number of levels and was doing something way above my pay grade at the time. So the first 2 or 3 weeks, I was convinced that I was going to get fired. So I was dealing with that, and I was dealing with the loneliness and the disconnection and being out on the West Coast where everybody dressed differently and spoke differently and listened to bands and music I'd never heard before. What the heck's Tears for Fears? I didn't even know what that was. What is this stuff they're listening to? Psychedelic furs? They don't look psychedelic to me. They're not even furry. So it was all very, very strange. It was a lot to throw at a 19-year-old kid all at once. And so it was like juggling, you know, it was like being on a unicycle going down a tightrope, juggling 10 sets of plates. It was just a lot of things to do at once, you know, as well as just play it cool around Phoebe Cates, which was a challenge in and of itself. My favorite thing about hanging out with Phoebe then was, of course, I was completely unrecognizable, hadn't done anything to warrant recognition, and she was this superstar, at least in the 25 and under set from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, you know, with the most iconic red bathing suit perhaps of all time. And the effect she had on both the male and the female population around her age and even older was absolutely amazing. Like, she and I would be in a restaurant, and of course, like I said, she's famous and I'm not. And she gets up and goes to the bathroom, and one guy came over to me, and he was a complete stranger. He grabbed my arm so hard, he almost bruised it, and he said, "You know her?" Like that. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm doing a movie with her. Take your mitts off my shoulder." It had thumbprints on it. And so people would lose their mind. We were in a place in Westwood, I don't think it's still there, it's called the Mustache Cafe. Sure. And we were having dessert. We were about to order, and the waitress came over, and she looked at me and she goes, "What would you like?" And I was like, "I'll have Clams Casino," or whatever it was that I was having. Turned to Phoebe and was like, "And what will you have?" And she's just like, "I'll have the spaghetti bolognese," or whatever she ordered. And the woman was like, "Spaghetti. I'm sorry, I can't do this." And she walked away. She was thrown by Phoebe, she couldn't take her order. So the next waitress came over and we're like, "We're sorry about that. What would you like?" And took the rest of our order. Wow. So it was my first time being around someone who's famous. Yeah. You know, I didn't grow up I hanging around famous people. I'd never known famous people. except in like magazines like Starlog or Famous Monsters of Filmland or all of that stuff that I read where I worshipped Rick Baker and then eventually worked with him in Gremlins 2. Yeah. Rick Baker!
How was that different than the first film?
Well, I mean, that's a nice segue because Rick Baker has a lot to do with why it's different. I mean, I've said this before many times, that if I had to pick the one person who I thought was absolutely the most mind-bogglingly talented person I ever worked with, I'd have to say it was Rick Baker. Because this guy can do anything. He can sculpt, he can draw, he can come up with stuff, he does computer graphics. The breadth of what he can do is so shocking. He's like a modern day, for movies, he's like a Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo figure. He did a sketch one time of Gremlins, was like the most, of Gizmo. It was the most beautiful, detailed thing. Like you'd come in close and you could see like the fibers of the hair around the muzzle of Gizmo. And I go, oh my God, Rick, that is beautiful. How long did that take you to do it? And he goes, I think like 20, 25 minutes. I was like, get the out of here. 25 minutes with that. Come on. I mean, the guy's only got 7 Oscars out of 12 nominations. Yeah. That's all, just 7. Guy needs 2 shelves. Stupid.
He should have tried harder.
Yeah, he should have. Should have worked harder.
I got to work with him on the film that he had a nervous breakdown on.
Which one?
The Grinch.
Oh, did he have almost nervous breakdown? Yeah. Legitimate nervous breakdown?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Because he shut down his shop pretty soon after that. But what amazing work. And so many people to put faces on. Unbelievable.
We did
brilliant.
Not to buff up he's actually remarkably humble for a guy who's achieved just about everything you can in the business. Starting with American Werewolf in London. Well, actually, he worked on a little known movie called The Exorcist with Dick Smith when he was 21.
On King Kong 76.
King Kong in 76. I mean, it's a Hall of Fame, insane career. You look at his credits. You're like, how is this even possible? But I don't even. Oh, that's right. I forgot where I was going. I lost my choo-choo of thought there for a second. So we did a 2014 30th anniversary. This year is a 40th anniversary. Don't remind me. And the 30th anniversary we did for a UK publication called Empire Magazine. And to do it, for the first time, we got Chris Wallace, actually is how you pronounce his name, and Rick Baker, and Dick Miller and Joe, Dante, and Mike Fennell, everyone associated with Gremlins 1 and 2, put them in the same room for the first time in ever. And we did it at Rick Baker's studio, which he was liquidating out in the valley. And he gave me a tour of the studio, and it was I want to curse, but I won't because I'm a New Yorker, but it was ridiculous. It was absolutely insane that one person did all of this stuff, whether it was Men in Black, all the things he did for the Nutty Professor, Harry and the Hendersons. It was absurd. Gorillas in the Mist. It was ridiculous. So his impact on Gremlins 2 was enormous. He came up with the Brain Gremlin. The Brain Gremlin, to me, actually doesn't look that great on film. It just looks like a gremlin and like somebody did the mouth. But that's not what it was in person. In person, it's, to this day, the best special effect I've ever seen. He had 117 different facial muscles for the Brain Gremlin, each one coordinated to a pronunciation of a particular syllable or consonant. So if someone went, the gremlin's face would go, right? It would have that thing. This is in 1989. It was all done with computers before the internet.
Yeah.
Get out of here. He's like, what are you trying to do? Make us all feel like morons? He was so smart, everything. So what he did was he had Tony Randall. They had Tony Randall come out. You just saw or heard the trailer or saw it. Could you see the visuals? Yeah. So he would have Tony Randall do the narration. And then he would feed the narration through something that connected to the cables. And the cables would read the zeros and ones, binary information, translated into facial muscle expressions so that when you said the thing, the face matched the exact pronunciation. And then he would speed it up. He's like, but it was, I go, but it's not in sync. He goes, no, it's exactly 4.2 seconds behind in sync, but you just shoot it that way, and then you just move the dialogue up 4.2 seconds, and it syncs perfectly. And I was like, stop it. You're annoying me now with this whatever, especially doing it in 89 before there was an internet is just, he's like, well, I did it on Linux, and then I did this, and then you know all these computer languages, and I'm like, please, just stop. So the Brain Gremlin, when we saw it, I was like, this is going to win another Oscar for him because it looked like magic. But in the movie, because you go in there and just CGI the mouth, now it just looks like whatever. But that Brain Gremlin is there talking and expressing itself exactly the way you see it in front of everybody, and it was stupid and insane and amazing.
Did you have to change at all your acting with the new batch?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because actually my acting was exponentially easier because, they say that every human being should learn from their mistakes. So in Gremlins 1, because they had never done a lot of this animatronic stuff, they really blundered in the writing of this script. Not that Chris Columbus blundered, but he would say things like, Billy picks up Gizmo and takes him into the bathroom to bandage his ear. Now, in order for me to have Gizmo like talking in my hands, I would have to pull my shirt sleeves down like this, and then you had about 14 or 15 cables that came out of Gizmo's butt. They would be taped to my arm, go down through my body, all down through my legs, and they would cut a hole in my sock, and the cables would go across the room, each cable to a different joystick, manned by a different crew member. They'd all be watching the same monitor, and they practiced for months to synchronize all 14 cables so that they moved in unison and looked like a natural expression. And they practiced it for several months. And so Chris Walas, who, by the way, also had a nervous breakdown on Gremlins 1 and refused to do Gremlins 2, which is why Rick Baker did it, because it was just 2 years of hell. They kept changing what they wanted from him. So they'd be like, well, it doesn't have to walk, now it has to walk. Oh, can you make it skateboard? Oh my God, we love looking at it. Can you make it break dance? And so they kept asking for higher. So it's kind of like, I said to Chris Walas at the time, it's like kind of like saying, hey, can you climb K2? Then can you climb Everest? We're building something on top of Everest. Can you climb that? Can you build a thing built on top of the thing that you put on top of Everest and climb that? By the end of it, you're ready to freaking kill the person who keeps asking you to do more and more work. It's like your desk was just empty and they come over with a giant pile of books and put it on your desk just as you finished doing it. So they made lots of sort of elementary mistakes, and they made things very complicated. And then Rick came along and looked at the script and sat down with Charlie House and said, let's see if we can put him in something so that Billy's always doesn't have to carry him in his hands. So that's where you have the toolbox, right? I'm carrying him in the toolbox, and he's in the toolbox. You put the toolbox down, you open the thing, and Gizmo's in the toolbox, which then you can just cut a hole in the table underneath it and have all the cables going out. So all through Gremlins 2, I never had Gizmo wired to me, which was extremely difficult and cumbersome and time-consuming and everything like that. You would just have Gizmo preset on whatever table or, in the file cabinet. You had a fake back out of the file cabinet and the cables going out there. So if you look very closely, I am never holding Gizmo in my hand. There's one time when I picked Daffy up, and he's going blah, 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 and going from one side of the thing to the other, and that was just something Rick built that was just a remote control thing that just had to basically flap.
Right.
And that's very simple to do. By 1989, that was very easy to do. So I just had to pick up the flapping Daffy and put him down on the thing and do what I call the old switcheroo, where you have one here and one preset, and you stick it off camera, and the person grabs it, and then camera pans over to the preset one, and it looks exactly like the same one.
The Texas switch.
The Texas switcheroo. Yep, it was great, and we lived and died by the Texas switcheroo in both movies.
The second movie is so audacious, and it's interesting because in the 80s, you had all these sequels that were just remakes of the first movie, right? Beverly Hills Cop 2 and another 48 Hours. It's like a lot of the stuff, it felt it's the same. But Gremlins 2, I mean, Joe Dante had held out for years to do a sequel until he could have sort of the autonomy to do what he wanted. And he does the next batch, which is the new batch, which is just extraordinary in how completely different it, and which is why it stands the test of time and is so wonderful. I wonder what was your feeling? Obviously, you're happy to work, but what was your feeling when you were introduced to and saw this was going to be completely different? You're going to be in the city. John Glover was going to play this Trumpian villain and all this kind of stuff. And then also, it was a chance as a genre fan to meet all these great people like Christopher Lee and all these fantastic cameos. Just a little bit about your experience with that, or you want to save it for the book?
Gremlins 2 isn't in the book because it ends in July '84. So obviously, I have very mixed feelings about Gremlins 2 because there's sort of Gremlins 2 is a movie, and then there's Gremlins 2 impact on the franchise.
Right.
And you just have to be honest and say that Gremlins 2, the financial failure of Gremlins 2, killed the franchise.
Right.
So, I mean, you have to ask me, would I rather there be a Gremlins 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 like Scream? You bet. I would much rather have that. It just basically sort of, you can ride those franchises like actors do for a decade or so. Look what being Iron Man did for Robert Downey for 10, 12 years. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Took him from the abyss to superstardom. So you want to be in a franchise for as long as possible. That's why the Bond guys do it for 5, 6 times until they eventually just kind of feel like they age out of the part and they need to step down and let a younger buck take over. But it was a huge disappointment when Gremlins 2 came out and tanked, especially since it was supposed to open May 3rd or 4th opposite very weak competition, the Goldie Hawn Mel Gibson movie Bird on a Wire, which nobody barely even remembers. It would have killed then. But the two gentlemen who were running Warner Brothers at the time in 1990, they had a screening up in San Francisco, and the test scores were unlike any test scores they had ever seen. They were like 98s, 99s, almost perfect scores. And they thought to themselves, oh my God, this is going to be even bigger than the first one. And there was a movie coming out at the time called Dick Tracy with Warren Beatty and some young singer named Madonna. And literally they moved it from May the 5th to the middle of June, right in the thick of all of these movies opening right opposite Dick Tracy, because they got into shall we say, a bit of a measuring contest with people at another studio. I'll let you guess what they were measuring. And literally after they moved it and announced how proud they were with the plans of moving it, Warren Beatty came out and said he was dating Madonna. And it was dating Madonna, oh my God. And it was, if you remember, her sex book came out where she was naked through most of it. She's the biggest star on the planet. And it was Gremlins 2, when, what, Dick Tracy, this, that, blah, 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 blah. And so we just got killed by Dick Tracy at the opening. And that basically was the end of the live action franchise until right about, now. Mm-hmm. So Warner Brothers Discovery is, shall we say, having a little bit of growing pains. They're trying to do the best they can with the franchise. One of the things they clearly felt they needed to do was increase awareness for anybody under 20. So they did Secrets of the Mogwai, which, they haven't pushed as much as we would have liked. That's on HBO Max. Along with the second season, they released 5 episodes of the season 2, which is called The Wild Batch.
That is one of the Secrets of the Mogwai. It's on there.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Secrets of the Mogwai. What channel are we on? The secret is HBO Max. But my feeling is, and this is just a feeling, because I know in 2018 for a fact that Chris Columbus wrote a script for Gremlins 3. Mm. And some of it leaked out and was fairly controversial because I guess one of the things that Chris Columbus started thinking as he got older and more mature, instead of just being a 22-year-old NYU student or whatever, he came somewhere in New York where he went to school, he started thinking about things like the emotional ramifications of the fact that Gizmo can multiply and turn into horrible creatures that can destroy and murder people. Yeah. And so he started thinking about things like, shouldn't we euthanize Gizmo since he's a danger to the public? And I was like, really? You're going to go down that path for Gremlins 3? Killing Gizmo? Gremlins 3, killing Gizmo. Step right up and watch that bad boy. But if he's posing an ethical question or something like that, I suppose it's true. Sorry, buddy, but you are potentially dangerous in the wrong hands. You are potentially, you've got rules for a reason. So there was something going on along with that. I don't know whether Warner Brothers just nixed the idea, but my feeling is that they did something else, which is what studios do a lot, which is that they sort of took the temperature of the population by doing some marketing research and found that there simply wasn't enough of awareness because it had been dormant franchise for 3 decades. Enough awareness in the population for people, for a key demographic, which is 13 to 20, or even younger, 8 to 18. And so I think they figured that I call it Johnny Gremlin seed. The Secrets of the Mogwai is spreading the mythology around to hoping that it grows new followers and stuff like that. And that's what I think they're trying to do with this. Or at least maybe they're doing a CYA thing, which stands for cover your butt. I'm being very polite here in Columbus. And, just saying, like, if they do a live action movie and that fails too, they're like, well, we tried with the animated series to educate the population. It's not my fault. So they're either doing a cover your ass thing or they're doing smart marketing. So we'll see, because I think now that there's only been 2 seasons of the animated series, and there will only be 2 seasons. Now, essentially, in the next year or 2, you'll either have a Gremlins 3. You will not have I can tell you this, you will not have a Gremlins reboot because Chris Columbus owns part of the rights and he blocks it. They want to do a reboot just like they rebooted RoboCop and everything else. Chris Columbus goes ixnay on the e-boot Ray, and it's just not happening as long as he's alive. So there's not going to be a reboot. There might be a Gremlins 3, and if there is a Gremlins 3, it's got to happen in the next 2 or 3 years, or my guess is it just simply won't happen, and you'll be left with 2 of the most perfect films ever created in cinema history. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, you may have to start dating Madonna.
There you go.
Now, one of the other seminal figures who's been involved with the Gremlins franchise, we haven't talked about, is Spielberg.
Sure.
And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about this being an Amblin film and Spielberg's involvement, and obviously that would be very helpful in terms of a third film if Spielberg were to say, this is something I want to see happen, because it's hard for Warner Brothers to say no to Steven.
Sure. So it's been very interesting, the relationship that I've had with Mr. Spielberg, because I've only met him, 5 or 6 times, being a New Yorker and him being out in Los Angeles all the time. He cast Phoebe and myself as executive producer. He had casting approval, so he's the one who cast Phoebe and myself, and then promptly left for Sri Lanka to do Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So we shot from April 27th to August 3rd, 1983, basically almost the entire spring and summer of 1983. And I would say he didn't come back until mid-July. So he was around for the last 2 to 3 weeks, and he definitely made his presence felt on set. Not in any kind of aggressive way, because he realized all he needed to do was show up. And when he showed up, it was like the king had an unannounced meeting at a small village hamlet in the 1500s. The king is coming! Oh my God, the king is coming! Everybody, this and that. In my book, I talk about how I was in the makeup trailer and I heard a hubbub outside. And a woman opened the door. I wish I could remember who it was. She opened up, she goes, "Spielberg's here. Look busy." She closed the door. And everybody started just rearranging shelves and doing whatever they needed to do to look like they were super hard at work, because most people were sitting around sipping coffee and doing whatever. So the thing is, it's not like he wasn't like a wrestler, he wasn't like the Undertaker arriving and getting out of a limo and, with smoke and lights and everything. He just showed up. Yeah. And, you have to realize, let's put Spielberg in perfect context in July of 1983. His last movie was E.T., which made $1 billion 1983 money at the box office, which is about $3.5 billion today. So he was 36 years old, and he had already done Jaws, Close Encounters, Raiders, Poltergeist, E.T.
And 1941.
And 1941. I'm leaving that out because I want to do Gremlins 3. For those of you who know about the checkered past of 1941, you'll get that joke. So, and Twilight Zone the movie.
Right.
One episode of Twilight Zone the movie. And Amblin, his new company, Gremlins, was the very first Amblin movie.
Right.
And actually, if you want a nice little Easter egg, because I know you guys love this kind of thing, if you look on the Gremlins poster, you'll see my hands holding the box, and you'll see I'm wearing a pair of jeans. And on the button, the silver button of the jeans, if you look closely enough, is in fact the brand new Amblin logo pressed on the button of the jeans as a little Easter egg on the poster. The original
Sweet.
John Alvin.
John Alvin, yeah.
John Alvin, the late great John Alvin, who did the painting, which just sold at Sotheby's for $180,000 for the Gremlins poster. Thank you very much, Mr. Alvin. So anyway, getting to Spielberg, he showed up on the set. He showed up one day, and I was in the trailer, and Joe Dante, I don't want to give too much of my book away, but Joe Dante walks in and goes, "Steven's here, and you know the kissing scene you're supposed to do with Phoebe Cates?" And I'm like, do I know the kissing scene I'm supposed to do? How many times have I read that scene in the last 14 weeks? And I go, yes. He goes, "Steven would like to direct it." And I said, "I'm sorry, I thought you just said Steven would like to direct the kissing scene," which of course is impossible. He goes, "He would like to direct it, and so we're going out to the set now." So I was nervous enough having to kiss Phoebe Cates after becoming her best buddy for 14 weeks. You know, she basically shut down any type of romantic relationship by simply the first hour I met her going, "My boyfriend this, and my boyfriend that, and my boyfriend who I live with does this, and my boyfriend who works..." So I was like, I get it.
Yeah.
Taken, living with a guy, not interested. Moving on.
As they do.
As they occasionally do. And so I just decided, you know, she's taken, it's pointless. The guy's 5 years older than me. I'm 19. The guy's an old man. He's 24.
Right.
I mean, my God, 24, he's ancient. You know, you think that way when you're 19. And so I was nervous just because we had such a nice friendship. We were hanging out constantly. When we weren't working, we were going into Westwood. We were seeing triple features. I remember one time we went to see Tender Mercies, James Toback's Exposed, and Trading Places, all in one day. Just bang, bang, boom. At the Bruin and across the street at the Fox Village. Yep. Yeah. In both those classic theaters. And of course, Gremlins ended up playing at the Bruin, which was fabulous. So I went out there, and Spielberg's idea was, and it was an interesting idea, was that Phoebe and I go in for the fateful kiss that the audience has been waiting for, and at the last second, Gizmo, who's in the backpack, pops his head up and goes, "Oh," or something like that, and interrupts the kiss, and we're like, "What? And so we tried it a couple of times, and of course, Joe Dante, who had been directing the movie for 14 weeks, and realized that the audience would be waiting, at least the female portion of the audience, would be waiting for the romantic payoff, was like, that was very interesting. Let's try it the way it's scripted. And so we did a few when it was scripted and whatnot. So that was my second most memorable incident with Spielberg. The first one was when Mr. Spielberg was kind enough to let myself, and to a lesser extent Corey Feldman, who was 11 at the time, play video games in his Amblin office. So I was given full access anytime I wanted to, which happened a lot because Gizmo would break a lot. His ear would snap off. Dog stepped on his ear, ripped it off. That was a 6-hour delay. I was like, yes. So Missile Command, Millipede, Food Fight, and a Formula One game called Pole Position.
Oh, yeah.
Were all stand-up games in his office. So there was something happened with one of the Mogwais, strolled over to Spielberg's office, started playing Pole Position. How are we doing on time?
We're going to go to questions as soon as.
Okay, as soon as I'm done, I'll speed up.
As soon as we finish talking
so
about
I got in the pole position thing, and I started playing it. And over my left shoulder, these video games had kind of a reflective surface on it. In the reflection, I see a very, very familiar-looking bearded person with glasses. And it was, in fact, Mr. Spielberg standing over my shoulder. And I did one of these, like, Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver things where he goes... right? When he turns around, looks at the passengers in Taxi Driver. I turned around, and it was Mr. Spielberg, and he looks at me and he goes, I'll play you. And I went, remember, I'm 19, I'm video game fanatic, and pretty cocky, too. So I was like, you're on. So he goes, you want to go first? I go, I'll go first. So press 2 player, we start playing. It's the greatest run of my life. I'm just going around this and that, circles, unbelievable through the chicanes, phenomenal, unbelievable, this and that. I think I had something like 500,000 points, and I was I can remember sweating. I was sweating at the end. I was like, mopped my brow, stepped back and said, you're up, sir. Got up, started playing. 10 minutes later, he's still playing.
Yeah.
He's gone through everything I went through. Now he's into things I've never seen, cities. He's going through down boulevards. He's doing the street course, everything that I've done, just decimating me. Just absolutely decimating me. And when it was over, and he didn't break a sweat at all. And I was thinking to myself, dumbass, of course he's amazing at this game. He owns it. Yeah. But I thought maybe 4 months in Sri Lanka, he'd be a little rusty. So when he was done, he stepped off. He's like, good game. And I was like, yeah. And then I looked at him and I said, you've played this a little bit, huh? And he goes, little bit.
Well, it's lucky that he was better because
at 19 it's like I wouldn't have been you don't want to meet the boss. You don't want to beat the boss. It doesn't really pay off.
Well, I think we have time for like 1 or 2 questions at most. So if you want to go to the mic, quick questions for Zach, go ahead.
What was it like meeting Gizmo for the first time?
Well, he didn't sound like Howie Mandel because that was all done in post-production. So basically, the first time they strapped him to me well, actually, they didn't need to the first time. They just had the cables going across the room. But they had to teach me how to hold him and position him and hide the cables and whatnot. They said, we've been practicing for months. So if you want to, just improvise, do whatever you want. You want to scratch his head, scratch his head. You want to get him under the muzzle, just like pretend like he's a real animal. Just treat him like a real pet. So I started talking to him, and I'm like, how are you doing today? And he obviously didn't have a voice, so instead he would make mechanical sounds. So I'd look up and go, how are you doing today? He'd go, and I would go, oh, you like this? I'll scratch your head. And he'd go, so it just had like clicking and whirring mechanical sounds like that. And quite honestly, after about 5 minutes, some creatures, actual animals, make very strange noises. If you look on TikTok, you see these birds and they sound like R2-D2, and it's very, very weird. So after 5 minutes, it just kind of sounded like his sounds. And he was very believable looking. He smelled like, he had a very distinct smell. It's like a combination of like a latex and this very, very particular powerful type of glue, obviously, so he had this interesting kind of almost quasi-animal, but mixed with chemical smell. But if you've ever held like a koala bear or something like that, hoo-wee, they got a smell. So it's like he had a distinct smell, he had a distinct language, he was like an animal. So it's just like, when you're an actor, you'll meet an actress for 5 or 6 hours and then suddenly pretend she's your wife and be in bed with her. So this was not a big leap for me as an actor of imagination to pretend that a creature was, a creature.
Thank you.
Great. Any more questions? Yep, go ahead.
Hello. I actually thought long and hard about what I wanted mine to be. And my question, though, is the part where Gizmo gets wet and like he's having a seizure and all those like puffballs shoot out of him. Sure. How did you guys do that from like a filming standpoint?
Sure. So that's a great question. So again, we did the Texas switcheroo to bring him over to the table. And then Corey spills the water on him. I'd like to not have to take responsibility for that all the time. Corey Feldman spilled the water on him and got him wet. You can take it up with an 11-year-old version of him next time you see him. And then the gizmo falls out of shot, and then they pick it up with, there's a hole in the table under the comic books that he's lying on. If you look very closely, you can almost see a little bit of the circular thing carved out. I don't want to ruin the movie magic for you. And so he starts thrashing. They did that with the animatronics. And then they literally had someone next to the table with little puffballs just going, pop, 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 just off camera. And then each puffball would land. They get a close-up if you watch the way Joe Dante shot it. The puffball lands, right? And then it cuts away to me going, oh my God, big expressive face. I remember thinking for the reaction shot of that, Joe Dante goes, so here's the thing. It's going to be really weird and really unpleasant. Trust me. So I want a really big reaction from you. So I gave him a few, and he goes, that's not big enough. I go, Joe, you're pushing into a close-up of me, and I'm going to be like overacting so badly. He goes, trust me, it's going to be freaking weird. Do a huge reaction for me. If it's too huge, I won't use it, and we'll go back to the more subtle ones, but give me something big. So I ended up going like, like really overacting, which I wasn't happy about. And he sticks it in the movie, and actually it does okay. It does okay, because it's really weird. And then they had another one, which is like a half-curled Mogwai. So it starts budding like that. And then they have the close-ups of the face. And we'll end on this because most people don't know this. It's really terrifying to think about it. But they couldn't get the gizmo faces when they were this size to be expressive enough. It's just too small. Right. So they had to build a giant gizmo head, which is about the size of from this chair to that chair.
Oh my goodness. And
they would have like 10, 15-foot pillows behind it to match so that the head matched the pillow behind it. And so they had this giant animatronics gizmo head that was absolutely terrifying. If you didn't know it was on the set when you walked in, you'd come around the corner and you'd be like, oh my God, this is a 12-foot gizmo head. And it was also animatronics with the giant, and people would roll the eyes when remember how he goes like this, like, oh boy, he's cute, right? Corey goes, oh, Gizmo's cute. And he goes, oh, shucks. They had people behind the gizmo head. Each person had to roll the eyeball at the same time to make him go, oh, shucks. So really a tremendous amount of creativity and ingenuity went into this movie to make even a 1 or 2 second shot seem like real and just make the entire illusion become complete. And as you can see, after 40 years, it seems to have stood the test of time.
It sure has. Well, Zach, thank you so much for sharing all these great memories with us, and I can't wait to read the book. When does it come out?
It'll probably be out 1 year from this month, probably Christmas for next year, Thanksgiving, Christmas next year. Being Billy, the making of Gremlins. I hope you get it and enjoy it.
And if you have more questions, Zach's going to be at his booth. But before that, as is tradition at GalaxyCon, they're going to take a giant group selfie. So if you could come up to the front and you can take a picture with Zach as they take a selfie. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Zach.
Everybody. Thank you,
And
Zach.
we didn't even get to Voyager.
Wow, that was really fun. It's always great to sit down here on Deck 78 and discuss things we can on the other podcasts.
Yeah, well, we could, but people would stop listening.
I know.
That's right. They would say, this is not Star Trek. This is not the 4:30 movie. This is not list of podcasts go here. But
well, now I don't want to break the illusion, but we're not really on Deck 78. So if you were, what would you be drinking, Steve?
What would I be drinking? I'd be drinking a pina colada.
And getting caught in the rain?
Getting caught in the rain.
Wow, I wish it would rain. Okay, what about you, Darren? What would you be drinking on Deck 78 if we were actually together on a starship?
I think I'd have a pan-galactic gargle blaster.
Ooh, that sounds good. What about you, Ashley?
You know what? I'm going to go with the blood of my enemies.
The blood of your enemies. Okay, well, that's great. Well, thanks for joining us for another Deck 78.
Wait, what's your drink, Mark?
Yeah, Mark.
Vodka cran?
Sure. I'd like a chocolate milkshake in a silver chalice.
In a silver goblet.
A silver goblet, okay. So you're listening to Deck 78, Inglorious Trekspert, Trekspert Briefing Room are part of the Treksperts Podcast Network. Copyright 2025 by Treksperts Plus. Executive producers are Mark A. Altman, Darren Docterman, Ashley Miller, and Stephen Melching. The show is produced by Peter Holmstrom, Brian Mix. Original music by Joe Kramer. Original music by Darren Docterman in this case. Video editing by Brian Mix. You can open hailing frequencies with us by emailing us at trekspertplus@gmail, and you can find us on all major social channels at Inglorious Trek or 430 Movie Pod at Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Twitter, and Blue Sky. You can also subscribe to Deck 78 on the Inglorious Treksperts feed or at the 430 Movie subscription feed. So until 2 weeks from now, thanks for joining us on Deck 78. We can't wait to see you again. And until then, fire the rockets.
Deck 78 is an exclusive podcast from Treksperts Plus.